session, and I'm absolutely delighted to invite Ryan Bennett and Justin Almanza, both of whom are Digital Forensic Investigators at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, or GBI. Let me tell you, this place, the GBI, has more acronyms than anywhere. I used to be in the Army, and I thought there was a lot of acronyms there, but everything they do is an acronym, so much so that they work in the CEACC or something. But what it really means is the Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes and Cyber Crime Center. Is that the correct title? Close? But more importantly, as I invite them up, come on up, Ryan and Justin. These guys do awesome work, and they do very important work, and sometimes it's work that is not necessarily appreciated or even known about by many in the community. So please join me in welcoming Ryan and Justin to tell their story. Yeah, it should be. And there's your zapper.
All right.
Test. All right, cool.
Like I said, my name is Ryan Bennett. I work at the GBI CEACC Unit, which is the Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit. It's my colleague, Justin Almanza.
Yeah, I work at the GBI Georgia Cyber Crime Center. That's what the G3C stands for. Ryan's unit is actually based out of headquarters in Atlanta. My unit is based out of Augusta, so the east side of the state over there. But we do very similar things, which we're going to talk about.
Just a little bit about each of us, I think. I actually graduated from Middle Georgia State University in the summer of 2017, just less than 3 years ago. I immediately started working for the Houston County Board of Education as a network technician, fixing printers and smart boards.
I can give a little bit of my background while he's doing that.
Testing.
Are you good? Okay.
I'm switching. Keep going.
Yeah, so a little bit of my background. I actually, my previous work experience was actually in the public school system. So I was a public school teacher for 3 years. I taught a little bit of middle school and high school. And then I also have a master's degree in computer science and cybersecurity from Columbus State University, and took a few classes on digital forensics, which is sort of how I got the foot in the door for this job.
My turn now?
Are you good now? Yeah.
My thing fell off, it's fine. All right, so I was a network technician at Houston County Board of Education, fixing smart boards and printers and laptops and all that stuff. And I ended up applying. The GBI had an opening, and I applied just for the heck of it. You know, I didn't think I had a chance, but I went for it. And for some reason, they hired me, and they decided I was qualified to do digital forensics and law enforcement. I only have a bachelor's degree. I know Justin has a master's degree. I have bachelor's in IT, and as of now, I'm a certified forensic computer examiner, and I have hundreds of hours of digital forensics related training. So now I'm qualified. I don't know how I'm about to start, but now I can say I am. We're going to go ahead and get started. A little about what we do. That says GBI CEACC Unit, but it applies to pretty much all of us at the GBI. We're an assistance agency. We receive cases. We help other local law enforcement agencies or anybody that requests our help, state agencies, school systems. Like if a local school system has a student or a teacher that is suspected of a crime, they might come to us and we'll help out on that. Cases where we have original jurisdiction is corruption, drugs, gambling, internet crimes against children, and child exploitation, which is mainly where I focus. About 90% of my cases come from. Though I also do fraud, murder, theft, anything that has a digital component, and that'll come to me, which is in the modern world about everything. So it might end up on my desk.
Yeah, and the assistance part, one of the main purposes of the GBI is, like it says, to apply, give assistance to local agencies. So like if a local agency didn't have the manpower or the resources to actually conduct, or the time sometimes to conduct the full investigation, or if it's an investigation that kind of crossed some jurisdictional lines within the state, something like that, that's where the GBI kind of can step in and apply, give assistance to some of these local agencies.
All right. We should probably define what digital forensics actually is. The National Institute of Standards and Technology defines it as the application of science to the identification, collection, examination, and analysis of data while preserving the integrity of the information and maintaining a strict chain of custody for the data. That's kind of confusing, even just reading that to me, even though I'm supposed to be an expert. So basically, digital devices have data on them. It's our job to take those devices and collect that data, examine it for the evidence and for the information to solve the case, and then write a report and document every step of the way, and maintaining chain of custody, because all this has to be documented and proven in a court of law. So it's very important that we maintain very strict documentation, which means a lot of paperwork, which is my least favorite part of the job. But you can read that second fancy definition yourselves if you want. I'm not reading it. Talk about I didn't put that on there. The 3 phases of digital forensics: acquiring, analyzing, and reporting. Step 1 is acquisition, which is basically you get the data. You're going to want to create a forensic image of the data, say a laptop. You take the hard drive out and use a program to create a forensic copy, which is a bit-by-bit image of all the data on that hard drive, because you don't want to make any changes to the original evidence, because that's not going to hold up in court. Cell phones and mobile devices are a bit different. We don't really have write blockers for those, but we do have special tools and software that can extract the data with minimal modification to it, and devices that can be acquired from pretty much any digital device that stores data. Computers, laptops, cell phones, tablets, smart TVs, Xboxes, drones. It all comes onto our desks, though I haven't had any luck finding stuff on smart TVs just yet. But.
So one of the other things that I'll say about this is that Ryan kind of hinted at it a second ago, is that at the end of as we're talking about all of this, the different stages of digital forensics, keep in mind that at the end of this, like, our end goal is to put all of this information in front of 12 random people and a judge who may not know anything about computers, telling us whether or not we did our job correctly, right? So it's a little bit like some of the things that we do in the law enforcement world of digital forensics might be a little bit different than like what a private sector might do, or even the military, their digital forensic guys. I know like write blockers and making copies of data are pretty standard, but just like the documentation, the precautions that we go through to not change any original evidence, documenting everything, just like you see on the TV shows, bag it and tag it, all that kind of stuff. Like, all of that is for things like chain of custody and all of these legal issues for when it gets presented at the end in court.
All right. Step 2 is analysis. Once you got the data, you got to do something with it, and that's basically analyzing or examining it using our special forensic tools and hardware and software. It's going to be a little different depending on the type of case you have. Like, a lot of my cases are child exploitation, so the main thing I look for is images and videos, because that's where the big stuff is. But also web history and peer-to-peer applications, torrenting. If they're sharing it, that's distribution. That's more charges that can go federal. User accounts, you got to prove that it's actually them using the computer, because anybody can get on your device, and you might be able to say, well, it wasn't me, it was my friend, but it was on your account, and it's in your name. You're gonna get blamed for it. So don't let your friends use your computer if you think they might be doing some bad stuff. Fraud cases, applications, documentation, Excel spreadsheets, murder, internet history, more images and videos, things like that. It all depends on the case, but generally, relevant information, date and times, images, keywords, things like that. And any evidence you find, you're not just looking to prove their guilt. You're looking for anything, whether that proves their innocence or their guilt. Because we're not looking to prove someone's guilty, we're looking for the truth and the facts.
And one of the other things about this is that, like, a lot of the stuff we have listed up here is sort of like that nice, like, the smoking gun kind of thing. Like, if we're working a child exploitation case, child pornography, obviously if we find child sexual abuse material on a computer, that's sort of like our smoking gun in that case. But we do work a lot of cases where, a local agency might be doing 90% of the work, and we just have one guy's cell phone that he used for a few days or for a week or whatever. So we might just be taking a small portion of this case, and we might not have that smoking gun or the, the big piece of evidence. But if we can prove using his Fitbit or his cell phone or whatever that he was at the crime scene between these hours, then that helps the local agency sort of carry out the rest of their investigation too.
All right. Move on to phase 3, reporting. Probably my least favorite part, like I said. There's several steps. You got to photograph the original evidence. You have to document every step you take, every tool you use, everything you did with that tool, and you have to make sure all your tools are validated and what you include in your report, and that just means that it works right and it's how it's supposed to. You have to prove and include in your report everything you found, where you found it, what kind of evidence it was, whether it was in the thumbnail cache or the recycle bin or just on his desktop, which you'd be surprised how often there's just a folder on the desktop called, my bad stuff, and you're like, oh, I found it. I'm very good at my job.
I wonder what could be in there. Yeah. And then we walk out the door and everybody gets good pats on the back and good job. Like, yeah, that was hard work.
We love it. Digital forensics in the field. It's generally we work in a lab, but search warrants in the field, you don't have every tool available. You don't have all your special software. So it's a little different, but the 4 steps are isolate, preview, report, and seize. Isolate just means you get it away from the suspect. You don't want them to have the phone or the laptop anymore and make changes to it, and you need to disconnect it from the network. So if I have a phone, that basically means putting it on airplane mode or putting it in a Faraday bag, because we don't want them, say they have a friend out there who knows they just got arrested, maybe they're next door neighbors and they saw it happen, they send a remote wipe signal to that phone, and you just lost all the evidence.
And Ryan likes those kinds of reports because they're really quick.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing was found on this
evidentiary
device.
value found, done, new case.
Nothing of value found. Yeah, we try to avoid that generally.
If that doesn't happen, you preview, and that basically means you hook it up to a write blocker, again, to prevent changes, and you look in the hotspots. You're on a search warrant, you don't have a month to look through every single part of the device. You look in the images and the text and the notes and the web history, and you find where it's most likely at, and you make the decision then, or you leave it up to the case agent, who are the people with the guns, because we don't get guns. They make the decision to seize the device or not.
Yeah, we didn't mention that. So we sort of both of our units are sort of structured similarly, even though we kind of have the units have different goals. But we work side by side with special agents is their title. We're digital forensic investigators. So we handle a lot of the tech stuff, the cell phones and the laptops and all the digital evidence. The special agents, like Ryan said, those are the ones with the guns. We send them in first if we think somebody's going to shoot back at us. And then after they do their job, they clear the house and make sure everything's good. And then we go in and assist with evidence and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we wait in our cars where it's safe.
right. But yeah, they're usually the ones, like Ryan was saying. They're a lot of times it's going to be their case that they're sort of leading, and they're going to ultimately make the call whether or not they want to take the evidence or leave it. Take the guy's cell phone or whatever, because it's usually their signature that's on the search warrant, or the judge's signature. It's their name that's on the search warrant.
And again, more reports, more documentation. There's a lot of paperwork in this job and in government in general. There we go. Here's just some pictures of us on, I don't think I'm any of these, but my coworkers, what it might look like on a search warrant. A lot of times you just set up at the suspect's dining room table if it's clean enough, which is it isn't always very clean.
That's not a joke, actually. It's very rare that you get a suspect with a dining room table that's clean enough to work.
Yeah, but I have worked at multiple dining room tables, including one where I was at the dining room table looking at this guy's devices, and he's handcuffed on the couch, staring me down as I'm looking for the evidence, which I did find. He got arrested, and it was pretty awkward, but it is what it is. On days that the house is too nasty to work in, we'll work in our cars. It's set up with battery inverters and stuff. We can hook our laptops up, and we'll do all our work in there. This is a picture of how many devices we might run into. Some places have dozens of devices. People don't throw away their technology. They don't ever recycle it. And we don't know where the evidence is. You try to prioritize. He had a phone on him, so we'll look there first. He had an open laptop, we'll look there first. But people have multiple phones just in drawers and in their closet, and maybe he was looking at the stuff a year ago. We have to look through that and find it. We try our best to prioritize, but you might be on scene for several hours. I've gotten home at 11 p.m. before from a search warrant.
Or later, depending.
Or later,
Yeah.
this is just a picture of someone's house. It's really not that bad, actually. It's a little cluttered, but it looks fairly clean.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can really see that picture from there, but there are some houses that we go to for search warrants that are significantly worse than that. I mean, you can see the floor in that house, so that would be pretty nice.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
I had one case where we had to call in animal control, and then the fire department, and then hazmat.
Hazmat, right?
Yeah, you weren't there for that one. That was a circus. All the neighbors came out. It was a good time for everybody. Yeah. Let's go on to the next one. All right, you can take it.
Yeah, so these are just a few of the tools that we use. One of the reasons that there's so many tools up there, and each one of these actually kind of like their sales pitch is usually like, we can do everything, but like we still have 10, 15, 20 different tools that we use. And part of the reason is just because we never really know what we're going to encounter. Like we could be working on the latest, the newest iPhone one day that has the newest encryption, and we're trying to figure out how to unlock the phone, whatever it is. And then the next day we hit a house and suddenly we're doing floppy disk forensics. So it's like we really have to. And then like Androids versus Apple devices, and actually the one at the bottom is Burla Ivy, which is vehicle forensics, which we're going to talk about in a second. So lots of different things. You never really know exactly what you're going to walk in on. And then we've got it divided up into commercial and open source tools. We try to take advantage of free tools when we can, but obviously these developers have to make a living too. So and they're not afraid to charge us a good amount of money for a lot of these tools.
And I have experience in every one of these tools except for the Burla IV. That's pretty new, and we don't use that in CEACC. That's more of the Cybersecurity Center. So I'm going to let him talk about that.
So one of the other things, these are a few pictures of some of the vehicles that we've done. And so our point with this was to sort of highlight one of the new tools that we're using for some of our investigations. So again, you've got to be prepared to kind of deal with everything. And then in law enforcement, in these investigations nowadays, like anything could be potential evidence, right? Like, I mean, it used to be that way with fingerprints and blood and stuff like that. But nowadays, even on the digital side, anything could be evidence. Like the light bulb that's screwed in there, if it records when it was on and when it was off, you could potentially use that light bulb to find out when the guy was home. Or like, I know a guy that had to do a forensic exam of a Samsung refrigerator because the guy had a habit of coming home 5 o'clock every day. He'd get something from the fridge, and then one day he stopped coming home. I think that was the same day that the next door neighbor was killed, or something like that. Just like little things that you can kind of start to piece together.
Paint a picture.
And then kind of paint that picture. Yeah. So this is vehicle forensics. We can go to the next slide. Well, those previous slides, actually, I'm sorry, back up. It was the back up one more. Yeah, so when we're doing this, like one of the challenging things specifically about this vehicle forensics is just we're looking for this ECU, this electronic control unit, which can really, unfortunately, kind of be anywhere in the car. That's what runs your navigation system, the GPS, when you connect your phone, all that kind of stuff. So sometimes that's nice right behind the screen of the car, the center console. Sometimes it's in the dash. Sometimes it's under the seat. In this case, it was in the back seat in the trunk. So we can go forward a few, keep going. Yeah, that's just us taking it out. And then once we get it out, we've got this board. You can keep going. We extract the data. It also just kind of depends on the manufacturer because there's no standard way of doing this. So this car, I think this one happened to be a Challenger. We could actually just sit in there and plug straight into the dash or plug into the USB connection port in the car and pull the information off the vehicle that way. This is a Ford F-150. This is just, again, the actual unit that we're taking out of the car. And that's kind of what it looks like all spread out. So we've got, again, Burla is the tool that we use. We connect that to the board that comes from the vehicle, and then it's not extracting it like at the rate of USB 3.0 or even 2. Like we're actually literally connecting pins to a board, and in some cases, if we had to do a chip off, like sometimes soldering to the board in order to get this off. So it's a very slow extraction process. I think this one, this was the Ford truck. It took us, I think, 8 hours to get the data off of this one. So it's just, yeah, very long process, but potentially some good data that can help us piece together a case. This one was interesting. So the car was actually burned pretty significantly. I don't know if you can even tell what's going on there, but there's the steering wheel on the left, and then that center console is in the middle. But we were actually able to pull that device out and pull the board out, and it was still intact enough for us to get some data off of that too. Yeah, next one. That's just kind of a picture of it all taken apart. I think this one was from an Infinity. This one had like 100 and something screws, which is not really too much of an issue if it's, you know, a burnt up car or the victim's car maybe. But I think in this case it was a suspect, or not, I'm sorry, a victim. I might have switched that a second ago. This case was a victim who was letting us basically take apart her car so that we could try to find out who had stolen her car a week earlier. So we just wanted to be very careful that we took apart everything, documented everything, and put it all back, you know, exactly like it was supposed to be before we give it back to her.
More documentation.
More documentation, right, yes.
Paperwork
yes.
is the name of the game.
Right. Yeah, and then just more pictures of the extractions. Yeah, so again, just this one's not on there, but or maybe it is the third one, but just kind of following up with what I was saying. Just the number of devices that we're looking at. I mean, nowadays it's not unusual for a person walking around to have 3, 4, 5 devices, you know, on them at any time. Like you might have a personal cell phone, a work cell phone, you've got a smartwatch, an iPad, and then your laptop is in your backpack, you know, or whatever. You know, so right there, if you were our suspect in that case, or we were we were at your house for a search warrant, then at that point we've got 5 devices potentially to look through to find out if you did whatever somebody thinks that you did. You know, so the proliferation of devices, along with the not just quantity but the different types of devices, like knowing how to do an extraction from a vehicle and also knowing how to get data off of a cell phone.
Yeah. I want to say that with every type of device, we have to learn how each one's different. We have to learn that. We're constantly in training and learning and Googling things because we can't know everything. Even as experts. And you know, smartwatches and smart TVs and phones and everything, it's just, there's so many things. And nowadays, a lot of them are coming with built-in encryption. And that makes our jobs harder, which, you know, privacy is good, but at the same time, it does make it harder to catch, you know, pedophiles sometimes. And so that's just one of the challenges we face, and that can also lead to legal issues, which you have a bit more experience in that field.
Yeah, so I was going to tell one of the interesting stories about legal issues. I think one of the speakers earlier mentioned the Amazon Alexa or the Echo devices. I only caught part of that presentation, so I don't know. I hope I'm not, you know, repeating too much. But from the law enforcement side, there are lots of legal issues as far as, encryption, getting into people's phones. I don't know if the speaker earlier mentioned things like the San Bernardino case, where I think that was the one where the FBI was basically trying to compel Apple to sort of put in a back door to their devices. And then lots of law enforcement agencies have ran into things with other big companies, you know, like Apple and Amazon and things like that. Like Ryan was saying, you know, encryption is good, privacy is good, and there are a lot of companies out there that say that they're going to protect your data, and a lot of times they really are. You know, they're protecting it from other people. Of course, they have all of your data, so there's sort of the trade-off. You know, they've got the database of everything that you know, but they're not giving it to law enforcement, you know, so like it's up to you, you know, which hands would you rather it be in, but that's kind of where we are right now. One of the sort of case studies for this, going back to the Amazon Echo, the Alexa, we had a case sometime last year where one of those, the little Echo dots, came into play in this case, and I think the big case from a few years ago was somebody was killed in a hot tub. And that's kind of what started the Alexa stuff. Ironically, our case from last year, somebody also died in a hot tub, and they wanted us to try to get the device. So I'm not sure what it is with these devices and hot tubs, but we were
Be careful.
so we ended up don't commingle those, but. We ended up actually doing a chip off of the device. which is like we actually took the chip that stores the information. We actually took that off of the board and put it onto a reader so that we could get basically the raw data off of the device and then try to sift through it and see what was on there.
That does destroy the device, by the way. You're not getting that back.
Yeah, and there are cases when we have to do that. Sometimes we've got to do that with like some of these newer IoT devices that might be necessary for us to do if there's no other way for us to connect to the device safely or to actually get the information off of the device. So in this case, we actually I ended up doing a chip off of one of the little Amazon, the Echo Dots. And it had some things like subscriber information, the username, I think the account, and like the Wi-Fi spot that it was connected to, stuff like that. It didn't actually have any of the recordings on it, which was sort of what we had hoped were going to be on there, but ended up not being on there. And I think in that case, they sent a search warrant to Amazon to try to get the recordings from what that device might possibly have recorded. One of the interesting legal challenges, I don't even know if so one of you might know, because I just know the case study from 2 years ago. I don't know any recent developments. But when Amazon was initially presented with that, I think back in 2017, it was a case out of Arkansas. The Arkansas State Police, I believe, had the Amazon Echo Dot, same kind of thing, that was involved in a case. They were trying to get voice recordings to see who killed who or whatever. And so they sent a search warrant to Amazon, and Amazon sent back a motion to quash the search warrant, which was basically like, nah, we're not going to give it to you, like, let somebody else decide. And they kept going back for, I think it was several months or maybe up to a year of like, we need this information, and Amazon's like, no, not really, privacy and such. And one of the interesting things from that was that Amazon laid out, I think, this is a publicly available document, so you can go read it. It's fascinating 92 pages of legal speak. But one of the things that they put in there was that it's protected First Amendment speech, basically. Not by the person who's speaking, but by Alexa. So Alexa's responses, one of the reasons, again, this was one of 4 or 5 different reasons, but one of the reasons that they gave for not wanting to hand that stuff over was because the idea of protected free speech and private free speech in that case was going to be applied, and it was going to be applied to Alexa's responses. So they couldn't give that away because Alexa's free speech was, they didn't want to infringe on that. So just some interesting, and then you can kind of let your mind wander with that into moving to AI in the future and all kinds of things. How is that going to affect our job on the legal side? So very interesting. That's just one case study of a legal issue in the field, and we could keep going on other things.
We don't have time for all that today.
Right.
But I'll say the last challenge I have here is intelligent and tech-savvy adversaries. People are getting smarter with their devices. It seems like that sometimes, but they know how their technology works more and more. There's encryption. There's all kinds of things. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, we're left with the low-hanging fruit, and we can only catch the dumb criminals, which we want all the criminals to be dumb, and it makes our jobs easier. But sometimes you can't get anything, and that makes our jobs a lot harder. But that's why we're constantly in training, and tools are being worked on, hardware is being developed, because it's a constant battle back and forth between us and the bad guys to see who can get the data. Other duties that we have is, participating in search warrants. It's probably my favorite part of the job. I love getting out there and you get to put the bulletproof vest on. It makes you feel real cool. I love that. Undercover operations, that's always cool. I've done several of those, and I've helped catch several bad people who were trying to talk to some underage children. Testifying in court. I was supposed to do that for the first time in February. That unfortunately got pushed back to April. I was going to testify in federal court for the first time. We'll see how that goes. Justin actually just testified in state court recently. If you can say a little bit about that, but not too much, we're running out of time. Yeah, that was about a month or 2 ago. Just again, big picture, same kind of thing we were talking about. At the end of the day, all of this evidence, all of our documentation, everything gets presented in front of, in that case, I think it was 12 people, and I don't know what their computer background was, but they might not have known anything about the
topic that we were talking about. This case happened to have a big networking component in there. So we were talking about routers and switches, and Wireshark came up and all this kind of stuff. Things that the average non-computer science person, just maybe somebody who uses the computer for business or uses the cell phone for Facebook, you've got to think about how do you communicate some of these technical concepts to somebody in order to prove your point in court. And then the defense attorney who is asking you all kinds of questions that may or may not even be relevant to try to either distract you or get you tripped up or to kind of throw you off there. So definitely an interesting experience, good experience.
Technical assistance, we provide technical assistance with other law enforcement agencies. We get called out just to, a lot of them don't have digital forensics training. They don't have, the budget or the manpower to send people to hundreds of hours of training like we have. And so we get sent all over the state of Georgia. We might drive hours just to help someone extract data from a cell phone and then drive all the way back. Validate forensic tools, I mentioned that earlier. You have to make sure your tools are doing their job correctly and they're giving accurate data because, again, you have to prove this in court and they're going to ask you about it. And giving presentations like we're doing right now.
And the presentations, that actually is a big component of the mission of the GBI, like not just this kind of stuff, but like Ryan's unit, especially the CEACC unit. Those are child exploitation crimes that they're working day in and day out. And so the goal is not to catch them, not to intervene after kids have been exploited. It's to catch, try to stop that on the front end. Yeah, thank you. to try to prevent that from happening. Prevention is a big thing. So a lot of the presentations involve also like school presentations to kids that might be victims of this. Hopefully not, but could potentially be victims one day.
Yeah. Another thing about presentations is I'm going to have to write a report on this when I get back to my office. So there's more paperwork.
You can do my report too if you want.
No, I cannot. Potential job opportunity. It's not, you don't just have to go into law enforcement. This is not the only avenue if you're interested in digital forensics. There is government, it's not just law enforcement. There's education, and especially private industry. That's where all the money is. So maybe in a few years. But there's a lot of openings out there. It's a booming field. When I was in college just a few years ago, I didn't really consider digital forensics as an option. I took a couple classes with Professor Yerby, and it was really interesting, but I had a plan. I was going to be a network administrator, and then somehow I became a digital forensic investigator for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, catching pedophiles and solving crimes. And that's really cool, but it wasn't part of the plan, and I don't really know how it happened. But I'm just saying, keep your mind open and don't limit yourself to one path because there's a whole world of opportunity out there.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys, one more thing about that is that a lot of the guys that I know, even from local agencies, who sort of have, a lot of them have kind of happened into or fallen into this job. Like if you think about a local police department that maybe has 40 people on staff, like 40 officers, they might just grab the one guy who knows a little bit more about computers than the others. They might start sending him to training, and then he becomes, the digital forensic investigator. So a lot of these guys that's sort of how that happened for them. I know that's how it happened for a few of us. My master's degree was more in cybersecurity, not necessarily digital forensics, but there are really strong connections between a lot of these fields: IT, cybersecurity, networking, all that kind of stuff.
All right. I want to say GBI Careers. This is a link that you can follow to see job openings. We just started hiring. Went through the interview process with some people at the CEACC branch in Atlanta. I think Justin said they might be hiring soon in Augusta. Not really sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's at some point we do have some positions to fill, but that's up to budget things and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's where the jobs will be posted when we do have those openings.
All right. Before we get into questions, what time we got? 3 minutes? I'll make it real quick. I'm just going to give some inspirational advice to the current students. As a former student, less than 3 years ago, like I said, don't limit yourself to one path. Keep an open mind. There's a lot of fields out there. I was going to be a network administrator, and I deviated big time. And the only reason that happened is because most of my time in college, I just went to class and went home. And don't do that. You'll regret it. In my senior year, I spoke to Professor Yerby, and he helped me get an internship. And that got me hands-on experience and references, which helped me get my first IT job, which helped me get more experience and more references. And I maintained a relationship with Professor Yerby, and he's actually the one who called me a year later into that job and said the GBI is hiring, you should apply. And so I did, and I got the job, obviously. So basically, talk to your fellow students and talk to your professors, because I said this last year, but they do know what they're talking about. They've got years of experience, and they've been where you are. They know all about this stuff, and they can help you, and that's what they want to do. That's what they're here for. So if I can say anything to y'all, it's talk to your professors and just take risks. And I took a chance on the GBI. I didn't think I was going to get it. I wasn't qualified at all for this, but it worked out pretty well, I'd say. All right, and now we can take some questions. If anyone's got anything. He's not looking, so we'll start with you.
Hello. I was reading an article that said that the UK and New Zealand, as well as Australia, were doing the backdoors for encryption. They wanted the companies that develop devices to put backdoors so they could actually get data from encrypted devices.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about it will happen in the US.
There have been, as far as I know, there have been several bills that have tried to make it through that would basically compel companies to put a backdoor sort of into some of these devices. None of those bills have made it through, but I know that it seems like almost every year they're being presented. I haven't checked this year, but there's probably one on the federal level that's either going through or about to go through this year. So that is a constant legal struggle between the big corporations and then law enforcement, and different politicians kind of have their own take. As far as our day job, usually the way that we kind of circumvent that is we end up contracting with third-party companies who are not necessarily law enforcement, not political. They're not.
Right.
They don't. Yeah, they're.
We don't have a special backdoor to all these devices. This is, we work through private companies, other third parties that are constantly working to find their own backdoors and find their own ways into these devices, which we have to pay for, and then we can get in. Sometimes there's not always a way in.
For example, one of those companies is one of the companies that I think first partnered with Verizon, so that when you took your old phone in there and you wanted to switch all of your contacts and messages and pictures and everything, you wanted to switch them from your old phone over to your new phone, Verizon needed a tool to be able to do that. Grab all of the information off your old phone, put it all onto your new phone. So they had this nice relationship with Apple and whoever else in order to get their hands on technology early to be able to grab the most information off those devices as possible. They still sort of work with Apple and some of those companies, but obviously, we nowadays can partner with them also for the law side, the law enforcement side of trying to pull that data off.
Can we take one more question?
Yeah.
All right.
Dr. Yerby and I were talking about this earlier. When you hashtag a drive, a solid state drive, every time you hashtag that, it's going to change. So has there been any case law on that when it's presented in court where the hashtag's going to change every time you check a solid state drive?
Can we explain, for anybody who might not know, explain hashing just real quick? Yeah. So the idea of a hash is basically what we kind of use as an example is sort of like a digital fingerprint of a device. So if you have the idea is that you can have a device, you can hash that device, and then you end up with this hash value, which is 30, 32, 28 characters, whatever hash you're using. You end up with a hash of that device where if anything on that device or that hard drive or whatever, if anything changed, you would end up with a different hash value. So what you're getting at is for some drives, if you hashed the drive once and then you went to hash it again, an hour later or a day later or whatever, you would potentially get a different hash value. So is that saying that something is changing on the device? Are you manipulating data? Yeah, so
I've not personally, I don't think I've worked any cases with solid state drive yet. It's becoming more common to the general public. Usually it's more of the computer inclined people who still have them, but more and more people are having them nowadays. I don't think I've worked a case with them yet. There is some concern about data loss with things like trim and wear leveling and stuff like that.
Wear leveling and trim and garbage
But
collection.
I haven't heard of any, none of my colleagues have mentioned it being an issue.
Yeah, as far as case law, I don't know. I'm not familiar with it. That's definitely an interesting question. I mean,
If you hash the individual evidence files, I can see those should not change, but
No.
the solid
right,
state
the actual solid state drive.
It's going
Yeah.
to, you have shrinkage with the drive, and it's always going to change.
Yeah. So again, for anybody who might not know, the other thing he's referring to is for a traditional drive, you could leave that running and the data is really not going to change on that just because of the way it's written to the disk. On the solid state drive, they've introduced other things like wear leveling and garbage collection and trim that sort of like, basically it moves data around on the device to help manage the data on that device, even if you're not doing that intentionally as the end user. So as far as the legal question, you know, as far as case law, I don't know the answer to that. That's interesting though.
Sure.
I'll definitely be looking into that, but I'm not sure. I think they're treated the same as other drives right now.
One more quick question.
This will be real quick.
Real
So,
quick.
I know you guys said you don't get to carry guns. Do you have badges?
We don't get the metal badges. We have a little paper thing that says our title on it, but
We have, yeah, they call them state credentials. Yeah.
yeah, that's what they are. But no, not real badges. We don't get to show them, like, if we get pulled over, we can't just be like, let me go.
We can't arrest you if that's your question, so you're safe.
No,
You're good.
we have no authority to arrest people or shoot people or anything like that. So,
Are you guys going to be around for the break?
Yeah.
So if you have any more questions, they're going to be around for the break, which we're going to take in just a minute, and feel free to buy them a cup of coffee, and they will tell you more. Thank you so much, both, for your awesome presentation.